Let's do it. Another episode of the Buckeye Fever podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Dave Holmes. We're going to talk a lot about the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State against Texas, in just a minute. But first, some sad news. I want to talk about a death here for a minute, if I could. Bit of a funeral here on the Buckeye Fever podcast. The Ryan Day on the hot seat talk, it's dead. And I don't know what to tell you. If you're a Ryan Day hater, this has been a rough couple of weeks for you. But it's over. It's done. I'm not going to hear it. I'm not going to entertain it. For a guy who never wins the big game, he wins a lot of big games, 4 top 10 wins. No other coach in the country can say that this year. Yes, there is a Michigan problem that must be addressed next year, but you cannot address it in the middle of a playoff run. And a bad head coach who loses a locker room would have had his team roll over and die after that Michigan game. And Ryan Day's team did not do that. They have rallied. They have rallied to be the team we thought they could be in August. You know, after the Rose Bowl, I was down on the field amongst the celebration, and we got a piece of video that went semi-viral. It was Jermaine Matthews Jr., the talented cornerback, hugging Ryan Day. And he looks right in our camera and says, "That's my head coach. That's my head coach. Keep his name out of your mouth. Stop saying bad things about my head coach." And you can tell he's going to war for him. Now, mind you, Jermaine Matthews Jr. is a guy who could be resentful of the coaching staff because for much of the year he has not played as many snaps as he wanted to. Denzel Burke was struggling mightily earlier this season. And by the way, Denzel has shown up. He is back. But Denzel Burke was struggling earlier in the year, and Jermaine Matthews Jr., maybe he felt like he deserved more reps. Maybe that's the type of thing that makes you angry at the coaching staff. But here he was, celebrating the Rose Bowl, looking right in our camera and saying, "That's my head coach. I'm sick of everyone talking bad about him." That's not a head coach who lost his team. There is a Michigan problem that will be addressed down the road. It's some sort of mental hurdle. But all I'm saying is, if your case is that Ryan Day cannot win the big game, you're drawing dead on your argument. It's over. That can't be your argument. So the Ryan Day hot seat talk is over. I don't care if they lose to Texas. He's still not getting fired, nor should he be. That talk is done. He just throttled the number 1 team in the country. He pounded an SEC team at home. Done. We're killing it today. The Ryan Day hot seat talk officially dead and buried here on the Buckeye Fever podcast. Let's talk about Jeremiah Smith. The debate in my head now is Jeremiah Smith the best freshman in Ohio State history. For me, it's one of 2 guys, and they're both inside the Ohio State locker room right now. It's Jeremiah Smith or Maurice Clarett, who's been part of an advisory role on this Buckeye team. The one thing Maurice Clarett did at the end of his freshman season was beat Miami and won the national championship. So it's your move, Jeremiah. But to me, those 2 guys are in a league of their own when it comes to best freshmen, at least on the offensive side of the ball, in Ohio State history. But how quickly things have changed now. Coming off the Michigan loss, everyone thinks this team might roll over and die, maybe lose to Tennessee. I will admit, I was very nervous about the Tennessee game. Now the Buckeyes are the betting favorite. So now there's this mental flip here to go from the team that everyone is hating on to the team everyone expects to win it all. And those are 2 different burdens to carry. The underdog burden is the easy one to hype yourself into. But can you close the deal playing from ahead? And the Buckeyes have played from ahead. They are scoring 28 points per game in the first half of these playoffs. And they're not playing dogs. Tennessee and Oregon scoring 28 a game in the first half. So my only question going into this Cotton Bowl, which, by the way, is going to be a road game, playing Texas in Texas, my main question is if Ohio State gets off to that kind of start, it's over. They're going to blow the doors off Jerry's World, no doubt. But what if Texas gets up 10-0 at the end of the first? That's the scenario I'm most curious about. Can these Buckeyes now rally from behind? They have been incredible front runners. Hopefully we don't have to find out. And they continue to pound people in the first half. But that's the question mark. If Texas can feed off a little home crowd energy down there in Arlington, If they can get up 10-0, do the Buckeyes get tested? On a talent standpoint, it's not close here. Ohio State's better than Texas. And Texas has gotten away with it a lot this season, including their game against Arizona State. Quinn Ewers' revenge game, I know Jim Knowles is going to have that defense ready to go. Because Quinn Ewers, for a while, was the poster child of everything that's wrong with NIL. He comes here, he gets some 7-figure deal, he hands the ball off once or twice, he takes a kneel down, boop, he's off to Texas. And I'm not faulting him for that because he wasn't sure what C.J. Stroud was going to become. Quinn Ewers was never going to play ahead of C.J. Stroud, so I'm not faulting Quinn Ewers. I'm all for players going to play and improve their draft stock, so that's not anti-Quinn Ewers. But I'm just saying there will be a chip on the shoulder for the Buckeyes, no doubt. This is the guy who committed to you, who left the program, and now you get him head-to-head. So the other thing about this matchup is it's Big Ten against SEC. When we come back on the Buckeye Fever podcast, I'm going to talk a little trash to the SEC. You know what? I've heard it all year, and I'm ready to lash out. We are going at the Southeastern Conference next on the Buckeye Fever podcast. Welcome back to the Buckeye Fever podcast. We started the show with that sad news as I announced the untimely death of the Ryan Day hot seat rumors. And we have one other death to announce today. The SEC is dead. It is no longer the best conference in college football. I'm sorry. In a subjective business, I do think that's a fact. The SEC is not the best conference. Will they be next year? Maybe. But they weren't this year. And here's what I don't get about the SEC. Why do they have to do these mental gymnastics to stay at the top of their perceived rankings? Because, look, I'm a Big Ten guy, went to a MAC school but live in Ohio. I'm a Big Ten loyalist, but guess what? I'm going to look right in this camera, or if you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to look right in your speakers. I have no problem as a Big Ten guy admitting that for the past 2 decades, the SEC was the premier conference in college football. Do you see how easy that is? Do you see how easy it is to remain objective and just say what's actually true? The SEC has been the best conference in college football for the vast majority of the past 20 years. That's not that hard. Alabama was rolling. LSU was rolling. Auburn had a minute. Florida had a little time during the Urban era. It's been the best conference for almost 20 years. That's not hard to admit. So why can you not admit now that you are not the best conference this year? You were trying to convince me that Alabama deserved to get in after getting beaten by Vanderbilt, after getting throttled by Oklahoma, the same Oklahoma team that just did its American duty and laid down to Navy. That Oklahoma. Alabama deserved to be in the playoff. The same Alabama team that just lost to Michigan, and Michigan had 8 players opting out early for the NFL draft, not to mention more than 20 players overall in the portal and early opt-outs. That 4-loss Alabama deserved to be in. And when I said mental gymnastics, here's what I mean. I know some people who are SEC apologists, and they say, well, Alabama had opt-outs too. They weren't motivated. Texas A&M lost to Southern Cal in a bowl game. They weren't motivated. South Carolina lost to Illinois. Oh, the opt-outs, and they're not motivated. As if the SEC is the only team that has to deal with opt-outs or postseason motivation. It's nonsense. You know what? Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, you whined about not being in the playoff, and guess what you did? You beat down Duke. Now, granted, Duke was down to a third-string quarterback, but you took care of your business. Ole Miss sure looked motivated. Of course they were, because Lane Kiffin had an axe to grind. As if Alabama didn't? As if Oklahoma was just there for a vacation against Navy? As if South Carolina didn't care? How about the playoff teams? They have motivation, right? Well, Georgia got beat down by Notre Dame. We saw what Ohio State did to Tennessee. Just admit it's not your year. And last year really wasn't either. Maybe next year will be. And you know what? If the SEC is the best conference in America next year, you better believe I will come on this Big Ten podcast and say it. I have no problem saying that. None whatsoever. But what is it with these SEC fans where they cannot admit that maybe this wasn't a good year for your conference. It's okay. You don't have to be the best every year. You weren't this year. You were objectively mediocre. Now, if I really wanted to rile you up, I would say, oh, when the cheating got legal, when the cheating got legal, what happened? When everyone starts paying players, what happened? That's a Northern Big Ten take. I can't back that up with facts because we never know what happens behind closed doors. That said, when the cheating got legal, the SEC did fall off a cliff. No, in all seriousness, SEC, you have been the conference for 20 years. Enjoy it. That's a heck of a run. Maybe you'll be back next year, but this year was not your year. And all of your hopes now are clinging to Texas, which, by the way, was not raised SEC. They just converted. Texas was not raised SEC. They just converted. But the rest of the playoff, Penn State, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, feels like Midwestern football was the dominant brand in 2024. I am headed to the Cotton Bowl this week. I cannot wait to see the Buckeyes take on the Longhorns. Next week, we're going to recap that game on the Buckeye Fever podcast. Hope you join us then.